Thank you for joining us for today's video presentation. After this video teaching, Brenda and I invite you to visit our website, where you will find many free resources and our video archives of previous teachings. Our bookstore has all of our current books and many of our teachings available on DVD. Also, right on the home page is the sign-up form for our email list, where you will receive our exclusive monthly newsletter. With the newsletter, you will get access to exclusive teachings, Bible research tools and resources, a monthly biblical calendar and Bible reading schedule following the traditional Torah portions, and other exclusive materials and access to future special events. We know that you will enjoy the teaching today. Thank you for joining us. Shalom and be blessed.
Abraham was a sojourner in the Promised Land. He didn't have a permanent home, nor did he build cities. However, significant events in Abraham's life happened in and around the city of Hebron. One of the most significant events is the death of his wife Sarah and her burial in the cave that Abraham purchased for that purpose. Genesis 23:19 and 20. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, before Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded to Abraham by the sons of Heth as the property for a burial place. Abraham purchased land for the burial site. Later he, his son Isaac with his wife Rebekah, and his grandson Jacob with his wife Leah would all be buried together in the same cave. What is the significance of the city of Hebron? Why is it important that Abraham purchased this land? Who were some of the famous residents of Hebron? I'm Brenda Cathcart, and this is Shadows of the Messiah. The Jewish people have a long history with the city of Hebron. Abraham first travels to Hebron after he and Lot go their own ways. Lot settled in Sodom, and Abraham settled near Hebron. Genesis 13:18. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord. Abraham had made allies from among the Amorites living there. When word was brought to Abraham that Lot and all the residents of Sodom had been taken captive by the kings of Mesopotamia, Abraham called on his allies and went out to rescue the captives. Genesis 14:13 and 14. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Anar, and they were allies with Abram. Now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Abraham was in Hebron when the three heavenly visitors appeared to him in order to announce the conception and birth of Isaac and the judgment on Sodom and the other cities of the plain. Genesis 18:1 and 2. Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and bowed himself to the ground. When Sarah died, it was here in Hebron that Abraham purchased a burial site for Sarah and future generations. The cave was not just for Sarah, it was for all future generations of Abraham. A burial cave would be purchased for the entire family. When a family member died, they would be laid on a burial slab carved out of the rock. After 1 year, when the flesh had rotted away, the bones were gathered and placed in an ossuary. The vacated burial slab would then be available for another family member's remains. Abraham chose Hebron as that place for his family. After Abraham showed that he was willing to offer up Isaac as a burnt offering to the Lord, Sarah returned to Hebron. She was living at Hebron at the time of her death. Genesis 23:2. So Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. We learn that the original name of the city was Kiriath Arba, the city of Arba. Arba was a prominent descendant of Anak, a lineage known for their size and strength. The name Arba comes from the word Arba, number 704 in Strong's Concordance, meaning four. Kiriath Arba was the city of the four, perhaps referring to the four giants, descendants of Anak who lived in the city. Isaac, who spent much of his life in the south in Beersheba, was living in Hebron when Jacob returned to the land. Genesis 35:27. Then Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, or Kiriath Arba, that is, Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had dwelt. It was there that Isaac died and was buried with Abraham and Sarah. Although Jacob died in Egypt, he insisted that his body be taken back to the Promised Land and be buried with his father and grandfather. Genesis 49:29-31. Then he charged them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite as a possession for a burial place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. So what is the significance of Abraham purchasing this land? Notice that when Abraham purchased the cave, he also purchased the field around it and all the trees that were in the field. Genesis 23:17-18. So the field of Ephron, which is in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which is in it, and all the trees that were in the field, which were within all the surrounding borders, were deeded to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth before all who went in at the gate of his city. In this land, trees represented wealth. All the produce of the trees of the field belonged to Abraham. All the shade and protection of the land provided by the trees belonged to Abraham. This region was a fruitful land. The name Mamre, number 4471, means lusty or vigor. The region was full of life. This is borne out when the 12 children of Israel visit the land before entering it. They traveled to Hebron and brought back a huge cluster of grapes that was so big it required 2 men to carry it. Numbers 13:22-23. And they went up through the south and came to Hebron. Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were there. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. Then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there cut down a branch with 1 cluster of grapes. They carried it between 2 of them on a pole. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. The valley of Eshcol, like the terebinth trees of Mamre, were outside of the city of Hebron. It would be reasonable to assume that the 12 spies went to Hebron to check on the burial place of their ancestors. They had a connection to this place in this land. The name Hebron means exactly that. It is number 2267 in Strong's Concordance, meaning the seat or place of association or connection. It comes from the word chabar, number 2266, meaning to associate, join, or connect. Rabbi Ari Abramowitz, in an address at El Shaddai Ministries, stated that Hebron is the place where the Jewish people connect with the Promised Land and with their ancestors. Because Abraham purchased the land, they have an undisputed claim to the land. When the children of Israel entered the land after the exile in Egypt, Caleb recognized the importance of Hebron. Caleb and Joshua were the only 2 spies who gave the land a good report and were enthusiastic about taking the land. Numbers 13:30. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." As a result, Moses had promised that Caleb could have any parcel of land that he walked on when he had visited the land. Deuteronomy 1:35-36. Surely not one of these men of this evil generation shall see that good land of which I swore to give to your fathers, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him and his children I am giving the land on which he walked, because he wholly followed the Lord. Caleb is one who wholly followed the Lord. He followed the Lord with all his heart. This is high praise. This phrase is used 5 times to describe Caleb. Out of all the cities in the Promised Land, Caleb chose Hebron. Caleb wasn't afraid of facing the giants who lived in Hebron, nor was he afraid of going after a fortified city. He was confident that God would be with him. Caleb explained his choice to Joshua in Joshua 14:12 and 13. Now therefore give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke in that day, for you heard in that day how the Anakim were there, and that the cities were great and fortified. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall be able to drive them out as the Lord said. And Joshua blessed him, and gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, as an inheritance. We know that Hebron was a fruitful land, and that the patriarchs were buried there. But this is not all that made it significant. We can understand more fully the importance of Hebron when we look at Jacob's reservations about leaving the Promised Land and going to Egypt. This was not the first time that Jacob left the Promised Land. When he left the land fleeing from Esau and going to his relatives to find a wife, God told Jacob that he would inherit the land promised to Abraham. Genesis 28:13. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. God went on to tell Jacob that even though he was leaving the land temporarily, God would surely bring him back to the land. Genesis 28:15. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. So when Jacob was hesitantly leaving the land once again, he wanted to know that he would return. He wanted to know that his exile wasn't permanent. Genesis 46:2-4. Then God spoke to Israel in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. So he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will put his hands on your eyes. God promised Jacob that he would surely bring him up again to the Promised Land. But Jacob died in Egypt. He never returned to the land, at least not in this life. And here we discover the deeper significance of Hebron. Hebron not only represents the connection to the Promised Land and the forefathers, it represents the promise of eternal life. The Sadducees were a sect of Judaism that didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. They came to Yeshua hoping to catch him with a trick question about the resurrection of the dead. Yeshua rebuked them for not knowing the power of God. He then continued to explain the resurrection of the dead in Matthew 22:31-32. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Yeshua mentioned that all the patriarchs were considered by God as living. Yet their bodies still lie in their graves at Hebron. The writer of Hebrews explains in Hebrews 11:13. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Then skipping down to verse 16. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob still wait for the promise to be fulfilled. They wait in the burial cave purchased for that purpose. They own that land. They belong there as they await the coming of Messiah and the resurrection of the dead. The word picture for the name Hebron reinforces Hebron as the promise of resurrection. Hebron is spelled with the Het, Beit, Resh, Vav, and Nun. The Het is a fence, enclosing a chamber or making separate. The Beit is a house, representing a household or family. The Resh is a head, representing the highest person. The Vav is a nail which connects or secures. The noon is a fish darting through water, representing life. When we put these together, we see that Hebron is the family chamber of the highest person who secures life. This is the family chamber of Yeshua, the promised seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There is much more we could say about Hebron. It is a city of refuge and one of the cities set aside for the homes of the Aaronic priesthood. David began his reign in Hebron, ruling for 7.5 years there before moving to Jerusalem. We cover more of this in Volume 4 of our study series, Shadows of Messiah in the Torah. Today, Hebron is not covered with trees and grapevines. The fields are not very fruitful. Instead, the countryside around Hebron is barren and desolate. There is only a small Jewish community living in Hebron. But in spite of opposition and the daily threat on their lives, they hold on to the land. When Dan and I visited Hebron in 2015, one of the residents of the small Jewish community said, "The reason we continue is not just for us, but for all Jews and non-Jews to be able to visit the tomb of the Patriarchs." Thanks for watching today. I'm Brenda Cathcart, and this has been Shadows of the Messiah. Shalom and be blessed.